All right, moving on now to step 28, lesson 28, whatever. Maybe I should have called these lessons, but anyway, we're too late now to worry about it. So, responsive design techniques, right? Actually, we've been very spoiled. I hope you appreciate that with the project type that we're using and the built-in scaffolded Bootstrap CSS that we have in place. We've already got, without doing hardly any work ourselves, a very responsive user interface, right? But there can be a bit of a problem area, and that is the index view. So just as like last week or so, we talked about, this is the kind of niggly stuff that we have to do as developers is address the different common problems that come up, right? And this is one of them. Too much data, too many columns, one or the other or both, right? You can just get too crowded on the index view. After all, the index is very important. In general, it's designed to give as much information about each record as possible on the screen, right? So, yeah, it's true that in most cases, there's usually something like a details view you can go to, because we can't always fit everything on, right? So there's additional information usually there. But, key information is usually what the client wants to see. And we want our client to be happy, right? After all, whether you're working for a company or you're doing consulting work, right? If the client or the end user isn't happy with your product, well, that's not going to work out very well for you either, right? So we're going to look at 3 approaches that can be really helpful in this situation when there's just too much packed onto the index view itself. Now, the first one is really just using the same display properties. We've been here before. We've looked at this. The idea is that we can change for different screen sizes. We can decide what should be visible and what shouldn't and so on, hiding elements as we go, right? So we'll look at using that as a simple solution to this issue where we're able to, right? The next one is actually even simpler in some respects. That is horizontal scrolling. Now, some browsers already support this for any table in HTML better than others, right? So we're going to make sure that at the minimum, we have a good effect of this scrolling if that's something that your client is going to be happy with in the end. Finally, we'll look at sort of the gold standard of what's considered then a solution to this problem. That is switching completely from a table into maybe a stack of cards, right, where there's a card to show all the information about each and every record that we want to see. Okay, so we have our copy-paste file ready to go, and you can use the same one here. And of course, I have Visual Studio open to where we last left it off here. Let me just run this so we can kind of see a little bit about what it is we're talking about here before we get into solving this problem altogether. So if I come in here, well, I have to log in. Hopefully, no, it doesn't remember. Fortunately, we do, right? Okay, check out Remember Me even. Let's see if that works. Okay, we'll save that. All right, so here we are. So I have my index view. You know what? It really doesn't look bad, right? We have our collapse here for all the different conditions in the patient's medical history. We can hover over, see those big long names here for our medical trials. So yeah, it's pretty darn good even just the way it is. And we know that if we click details, we can come in here and see all the details, right? The full middle name, if that's available, other things that might not be shown, we certainly not shown very clearly on the index view. Like we didn't have the phone number or the email address there. Everything is here. Everything about the patient. Of course, we've even got this master detail going, but that's above and beyond what we're talking about. We're just focusing on the patient information itself, okay? Most of it is there, right? So, but the problem is, okay, as an end user, maybe they might want to have this installed on a mobile device, or even without that. Let's face it, we don't always have the luxury of 2 or 3 screens on our desk, right? So quite often the user wants to be able to shrink it down off to the side and be doing something else on the screen in another area, right? Well, we kind of lose the effectiveness of our layout here, right? Even, some, as I said, some browsers are better than others. At least at the very least here, I can still click on everything, right? Some browsers, it'll just be completely off the screen and we can't even get to it, right? So that's another issue that we're going to deal with. So whether it's just for the quality of the appearance or even the functionality itself, we've got to come up with a better arrangement when we're dealing with smaller screen sizes. So a better, more effective, responsive design. So let me just get back here in Visual Studio. So actually this first div here, this is all our filter section at the top. We will be revisiting that later on, but right now our focus is the table of data itself, right? So what we could do is set priorities, knowing that, okay, all the information is available in the details view. maybe, depending on the priority of the information, we might selectively hide columns depending on the screen size. So looking at this, I might look and think, well, you know what? Okay, the medical history, it's all available there in details. Maybe that's something that, if we get to a slightly smaller screen size, we could live without. Okay, wait and get to that later on. So what I could do is I could add a class here to the history, to the TH tag, that defines that display is none, right? So it's not shown unless we get up to at least an extra large size, okay, of screen, right? The breakpoints for that are all in the documentation, so you can see how many pixels each one is defined as. So one of the things that's very important as a rule of thumb, you should always, okay, whatever class you're putting here with display properties in the TH tag, the corresponding TD, like in the body of the table, should have the same class, right? So let me come down here. Here's where we have our medical history, so I'll put the exact same class here, right? There we go. All right, so that's good. So now, if it's less than an extra large screen, that will actually just disappear, making more room for everything else. Well, what's the next, priority I could live with? Well, you know what? The coverage, right? Whether they're OHIP or not, 99% of our patients are OHIP. So I think that I could leave that. If it's a large or above, then I want to show that. But if it's below that level, we'll get rid of that off the screen as well. So come down here to coverage, make sure I put the exact same class here. Okay, back up to the header section. What's next? Okay, what is the next priority that I could live without if I really, really need to? Well, maybe the medical trial information. It doesn't take a lot of room because of that clever trick we pulled with the actual tooltips, right? But, we could live without it because it's available on details. Okay, if it's anything below a medium-sized screen, right, then we'll actually go ahead and live without this as well. All right. Anything else? Well, we're getting down there. Maybe the age, right? It's good to know, but you know what? If I am on something smaller or below, then I'm going to, or below a small screen, then I can say I'll live without the age information as well. Leave that to details, and away we go. So we'll come down here to age, put the same class here. So no display until we get to at least a small size screen. All right, so let's just see the effect with those changes that we've made. We're almost there. All right, so coming to patients. Okay, here we go. So if I start shrinking the screen down, okay, we should see the medical history will be the first thing that will disappear. There we go, right? So that's an extra large down to a large, so that is gone now. So as we keep going smaller and smaller, right, the coverage went, finally the medical trial, and last but not least, the actual age. Okay, now we're even keeping the image, which was disappearing because there wasn't enough screen size to show it all together. So we're showing the patient, the doctor, we have all of our edit details, delete, our links are still available here. So that's not a bad solution. Here, let's just use the developer tools to get an idea of what it would look like, okay, on a mobile device here as well. There's a Pixel 7 simulated. All right, not bad. Okay, I think I could live with that. So the question is the client okay with that? Okay, if they are, problem solved. But if they look at that and say, no, that's not good. I wanted all that information on the index view. I don't want to have to click details as I, look at all the different records that are shown on the index. I'm not good with this. I want to see it all. All right, so there we go. Back to the drawing board. Let's talk about solution number 2. I'm just going to quickly undo all that. Okay, powerful click on the undo button there. So we put it right back to where we started, right? So let's talk about the next idea. Enable horizontal scrolling, okay, of the table itself, right? Now, as I note here in my copy paste, there's a couple of approaches. We could just use CSS, okay, add a style here in a div wrapped right around the table. But Bootstrap has its own solution for this. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually wrap the table in this div with a class of table responsive. Okay, so again, not the filter at the top, right here. There we go. So I'll just wrap the div right around the entire table, cut that, go down to the closing table tag, and then I think my KD, Control Craft Inner. There we go. We fixed the indentation, right? Now, along with that, though, something else I would usually do in a case like this, you saw how the text in the cells would wrap around, right? Which doesn't, to me, it doesn't look great. If we're going to be able to scroll left and right anyway, why not leave it so things aren't wrapped? Now, we can do that globally for the whole table. All I have to do using this Bootstrap is add this to the actual class for the table itself, right? Text no wrap. And that globally in all the cells will prevent white space or text from wrapping around, right? Now, I should maybe mention, if you don't want that applied to all cells, you can just add it to the ones you want. Just put the same thing, text no wrap, again in the TH tags, and then in the corresponding TD tags for that column as well. And that would be the best approach there, if there's only certain columns that you want to apply that to. But here while I'm messing around with the class for the table, I would often do something to make it a little bit more, add a bit of eye candy to it as well, maybe throw a border, make table stripe, things like that at the same time, right? So let's actually run it again now, and we'll see with that little change, okay, the div and setting the wrapping feature, okay, for our cells. Now let's see what it looks like. Okay, so if I come up here, so yeah, I've got this nice striped color, and away we go. If you don't like that, you don't have to use that by all means, right? So let me just come down now as we shrink down. Okay, see, nothing is wrapping. Now the graphics do disappear. Not much I can do about that. Okay, so yeah, we're getting less and less visible, but I get guaranteed I can scroll left and right, and I can see all the data, right? So you can show that to your client, see if they like that approach. Okay, maybe they say, you know what, that's good. It gives me access to everything, even on a mobile device. I can just scroll left and right, and away I go, right? So I can see it all, I can get to everything, and I'm happy with that. But then they say, you know what, I don't really like this, okay? I don't like having to scroll, just get over here to these links for details and edit and so on, right? I don't want to have to do that. Sure, I can edit, and the edit works fine, and so on. I can add an image and things like that, go back to the patient list. But, maybe they aren't that happy with that solution. So don't worry. We have a third, okay? The mother of all solutions, so to speak, is available. Now, the only negative with this solution, to be honest with you, in my opinion, is that we're loading the data twice, right? We're pulling twice as much information almost down from the server. Back in the olden days, we used to try things what was often referred to as browser sniffing, right? So we determine what kind of a browser, see if it was a browser on a mobile device, things like that, and then decide would we present it in cards or would we present it in a table. Well, yeah, the trouble is browser sniffing was never reliable. So pretty soon after the idea was introduced, developers got away from it. So we just don't even do that anymore, right? Okay, so once we're going to pull my magic, there's very little, so I'll just undo everything back. So we're back to the original arrangement we had, right? Okay, so our third idea, switch to displaying the data in cards. So what we're going to do, let me come to the actual, once more, I'll shrink things down a little here. The table itself, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it inside of some divs, right? And then, of course, I'll need a closing div below. Okay, so now the entire table, okay, I set the display to none unless we get to at least a large screen, right? Okay, so let's just see the effect there. Well, kind of, I've given it away. Basically, the table will just disappear as soon as we get below a large screen, right? No big deal, okay? So let me come down, I shrink, get down below large, and there it is gone, okay? All right, fair enough. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to introduce then something to show instead. If we've decided that it's not going to be displayed on a screen too small, okay, then what are we going to do instead? Well, either above or below, I'm going to throw in a container here that disappears, right? It disappears on a large screen, okay? Container fluid, just so that it fits nicely on the screen, match the way we were approaching our overall underscore layout page. So inside the div, I'm going to add a row to wrap the cards, right? So inside here, I'll add a row for each item in our model, because again, we're working with our same IEnumerable collection of patient objects. So we can loop through, and each one we're going to make a card. We're going to make a card for each one, right? Now for the card, we'll have a head, body, and a footer, okay? We'll also throw in a media element as well that we can then use to show our actual image, right? Okay. So we'll make a card for each one. I'm going to replace that with the code for the card here. Now it's not even 100% complete yet, but you get the idea. For each item in the model, okay, we'll start a card, okay. This is just throwing a little bit of a margin at the bottom so there's some space between the cards, at least on a small screen and above. If you get below a small screen, then we're going to sacrifice that little bit of margin just to have everything as tight as possible, right? Our card header, okay, notice I can put that inside a H5 to give a nice big, and using strong here, what are we going to show? The summary, right? The name of the patient, basically, right? Right in the header of the card. In the body, I'm going to use a row just so I can have my graphic image, my thumbnail, okay, right beside the actual card text. So the card text, I haven't filled that in yet. We'll get that in place in a moment. The card text will be used to show all of the actual properties, okay, that we want to display. All the things that were normally in each column of the table row. We'll put that here just in a description list. So it's very much like the arrangement we would have on the traditional details view, okay, just shown right beside the image itself. In the card footer, well, that's a perfect spot then to put our links for edit, okay, index, our details, okay, which of course goes the index of our patient appointment controller, and then our delete as well, right? So that'll all go in the footer itself. Okay, so to finish the card text then, that's the only thing that's left. It's, as I said, it's pretty much our description list arrangement like we're used to using on a details view. So inside this paragraph, that's what I'll put. Okay. All right. This is the line height. Okay, that just keeps things vertically as tight as possible. That's all that's doing here because I want to keep the card, you know, nice and well compact, right? But we're showing the age, expected yearly visits, the doctor, the medical trial information, the medical conditions, just the way we have been in other situations as well, right? I have some extra white space here just to help me with my copy-paste operations, but don't really need that at this point in time. And that's basically it. Let's just see how it looks so far. Oh, are you excited? I'm excited to see the change here. All right, so let's come to our patient index. Looks the same, okay, as it should, right? Now let me come down. I'm going to start shrinking down, okay? When we get below large, now, yeah, you see, we might want to actually combine. You can combine all of these three techniques together, right? So as long as we're still showing the table, if I wanted to, I could do my no wrap so things stay and even allow it to scroll left and right if I want, or I could choose to hide certain columns while the table is shrinking. But the point is, once we get below large, then we switch to cards, right? So there we go. So we have a card right down to our smallest that we can do here in the browser, right? So we have a card for each record, each patient, okay? If there's an image, of course, we'll show that, and all the details. So there we go. Our client can't be happier because they're seeing every piece of information and about each one. And look at our filter still works. So if I want to filter for, you know, a given doctor, right, I can still do so. Yeah, there's a bit of an issue there. See, we set it up so the filter would stay open, right, which is nice when we have lots of room. But on, say, picture mobile device, suddenly now, okay, we're taking up most of the screen real estate just to show the filter area before we can actually get down and see any actual data. But the filters are working, okay? We can combine filters, search patient name and so on, filter by medical trial, things like that, etc., right? Okay. All right, so that's good. But what have we definitely lost? What is no longer available as a feature of our index page? You probably see it as well right away. We used to be able to click on the column headings to sort, right? Yeah, okay, I can filter, but there's no way for me to change the sort order here from the default that we actually are having, right? Oh, by the way, let me come, I'll just for consistency, I'll also show this with our developer tools here just to see what it would look like on a mobile device as well. Yeah, so pretty much the same effect that we were just seeing a moment ago. All right, so how do we address that filter issue? Well, I have a suggested solution. Okay, what we're going to do this, so far we've been doing everything just on the table and all in the view. We haven't even touched the controller. So we're going to have to do a little bit of work now in the actual patient controller. What we need to do is we need to have an alternate way that we can also specify, right? Also specify what the sorting options are. And you know what? Hey, look at that. We already have a string array of our sort options. Yeah, we're going to make good use of that, right? To actually get a select list in place to present those in a drop-down list. So we can just pick, we'll add it to our filter section, pick the sort option we want, okay, from there, right? So that'll work. So we do need some additional parameters, okay, because it's a different way of providing the sort information. What we're going to have, I'll give some of it away right now. We're going to have the sort field ID, so that will be our select list, okay, where we can provide the data from our sort options here, and then they can choose which one from our select list. But we're also, to allow reversing order, I'm going to have a checkbox for my sort direction, right? My sort direction checkbox will be like ascending or descending. So those will be added there, right? So now, I also want to fix that issue. Remember, I didn't care for on a small screen if the filter itself, that whole section, stays open all the time. If there's a filter applied, then it can fill the whole screen. So we're going to rely on the fact that you get that nice color coding, so to speak, of the filter button, right? As well as we have that summary information to show how many filters are there. That's good enough. So let's just come down here to where we give feedback on the filters, right? Right here, give feedback on the filters. Basically, all I need to do is comment out this, right? So I'm no longer going to actually keep the filter open, okay? I could change the code in the actual index as well, since I'm never going to use it, take that out. But you know what? This will do the job for now, right? And then down here, right? Here is where we check about filtering and so on, and we decide about the sorting. This all gets happened in this if. So all we really need to do is add an else, right? So we have our if, else. We'll sort by the controls we're going to add to the filter area, right? Okay, so our sort direction we'll get from our sort direction check if it's ascending or descending, depending on whether it's checked, right? And then our sort field will come from that drop-down list. So if they clicked on a button, well, then obviously we're in a large screen size, and they were actually able to click on one of the actual sort buttons, the column headings, right? If they didn't, then we can always check, and we'll just make sure that this is maintained properly, right? Whether it's visible or not, so that it will always give us another way to get the actual sort order. So the only thing we have left to do is we have to make sure we actually get our select list in place. So the best spot to do that is right down here where we're adding everything else to view data. So I will just add into view data the select list for our sorting option dropdown. And guess what? It comes from that array, our sort options array, okay? And of course, we'll set it back to whatever the current option is. Our sort field, toString, that will be the one that's selected, right? It's a very simple select list. It doesn't have a separate value and display text. It's just the string itself, right? And that's it. That's the only change we actually have to do in the controller itself. But of course, coming back to the actual index page, remember earlier on I shrunk down the whole div here that contains our filter section at the top. So let me get that open. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a new div at the top that will disappear, right, if it's not needed. In other words, if it's a large screen or above, okay? So I'm going to put it in right about here. Hang on. It has to be in the card body, okay? So above the row, but still in the card body, I'll just put this code in place. So here we have a div. Notice it's block. It's going to take up and be visible on the screen until we get to large. Large and above, the display will be none, right? So it's a form group itself, okay? We have a sort by, right? We have our, we're using an input group, so we'll have our checkbox, okay, beside, and then our sort direction, right, will be shown whether we're ascending or descending, whether we're checked or not. And then here's our select, okay, for the sort field ID, getting the items from our view bag, the sort field ID, away we go. All right, so that should now give us the option when the columns are not displayed, when the table is not visible, in other words, below a large screen, this should show up and give us the ability to change our sort order, right? Notice it's not there, okay? We don't see it on a full screen, right, on anything large and above, but as I shrink my screen down, so the table disappears, look at that. Now it showed up already, right? So I can click this, I can say, no, I want to sort by age, and then, that's the last thing. I don't like the word filter there, right? So maybe I'll just change that as well. Let's come down where that is. Right here, here's our input submit filter. Maybe because I'm using the same button for both applying the filter or applying a sort order, right? So let's just change that right there. I'll just change it to the word apply. I think that makes more sense. Okay? All right. There we go. So now I can apply. I want to sort by age. Click apply. There we go. And so now we see age 4, 5, right? We're definitely going up. And, one more little change I have to make. I'll check off descending. So it'll be descending by age. I'll click apply. And there we have it. Okay? So the age here is blank. That's why it's not there. 94, 93, 92. Yep. So we're in reverse order by age. And, we can just change that sort order anytime we want. Now, of course, if we're also providing a filter, right, then we, in addition, okay, we get the red here showing one filter applied, right, and away we go. But we can always open this to actually check what our sort order is as well. So, that's an alternate way you can get this whole thing, the functionality that we eventually need. I can clear everything. And that'll also put us back, by the way, to our patient order, alphabetically by the patient name when we apply, and away we go. All right, so that's kind of, as I said, is sort of a gold standard. If I go to F12, then you see it immediately comes up in cards, right? Because on a mobile device, we're never going to get to a large screen, right? So we'll always be in the cards. And that's what's in the cards. Pardon me. That's a terrible pun. I just couldn't help myself. Sorry, one final thought I thought I'd add is I've usually gone with that arrangement where the sorting is inside the same card, basically, as the filter options. But, if your client really doesn't want that, they want to be able to see what the sort option is at all times, then it's a simple matter. I just took it out of here. That's where I had it, right? And I just put it in a separate div underneath the card itself, right? So it'll always be visible there. I did make one other change here. I gave it its own apply button, not a clear button, but just its own apply button inside the input group. So that's right beside the drop-down list. And I changed the label on the one inside the filter card back to the word filter. So that's the little change I made there. I'm just going to post this now. Maybe I should mention one other thing I couldn't help myself is I went back to the actual table itself, and I just added some no wrap on certain of the columns so that it always stays, I think, a little bit more. And I also added that striped and bordered look to the table as well, right? Just to add that bit of polish. So let me just see what that looks like then. So you see the striping and the border around the table. But more importantly, as I shrink the size down now, okay, things don't wrap at all. Eventually the graphic image will disappear. There isn't room to show it, right? But eventually, of course, I will get down to the cards. Yep, there we are. So now we see my sort options clearly shown right here at the top at all times. I can separately apply a filter in addition. So it's, 6 one, half dozen the other, whatever your client would be most happy with. Let me go into a given doctor. We'll apply that filter. So you see the filter's applied, but I can independently now, I can change the sort order by age. If I want it descending by age, there we go, right? So everything's working fine. It doesn't interfere with the filter, having that. And let me point out this. Notice we're descending by age, right? If I go back to the full screen, right, you see that our sort order is still being applied, okay? We're descending by age, fully functional, everything is working, right? There's my filter area. I can clear that, but you see we still kept, oh, actually we cleared everything, right? That's what happens when you click clear. Sorry. But if I go back down to a small screen, right, I see I'm back to patient as the sort order. Okay. All right. Sort by doctor. There we go. And if I make it full screen, we're still sorting by doctor. I can reverse the order this way. If I reverse the order, go back down to a small screen, see that it's checked off, we're in descending order by doctor. So everything is tied together, everything is working the way we would want it to. So that's just an alternate arrangement you can put into place if you so desire.